Rain poured down in torrents, turning the streets into a canvas smeared with neon lights. Emily Lang, 27, stood beneath the awning of a small downtown bar, her white dress soaked and clinging to her body. Her usually soft brown hair now stuck to her face, and her bright brown eyes, normally sparkling with jokes, were red, revealing the storm inside her. She hugged a small sketchbook close to her chest, filled with childlike drawings, the only balm for her fragile heart. She pushed the door open, welcomed by the bar's warm amber lighting. The cozy space buzzed with soft jazz and the clink of glasses. Emily glanced around and forced a crooked smile. "At least it's dry in here," she muttered, walking to the bar, her wet shoes squelching with every step. She sat down, ignoring a few curious glances from the other patrons. The bartender, a middle-aged man with a kind face, raised his brow. "Rough night, sweetheart?" Emily gave him her usual smile, the kind that made co-workers laugh during meetings. "Oh, just training for a wet t-shirt contest. Think I stand a chance?" The bartender chuckled and slid her a glass of whiskey. She rarely drank, but tonight was an exception. The heat of the liquor matched the ache in her chest, and she welcomed it. To her left, a man sat alone, broad shoulders slightly hunched, fingers wrapped around a glass of amber liquor. He stood out in a way that almost felt unfair, chiseled features, slicked back black hair, and eyes that held 1,000 untold stories. His expensive suit looked out of place in the bar's intimacy, but he didn't seem to care. Emily glanced at him, lips curving. "You look like you just lost the whole world," she said, her tone lighter than she felt. "Or maybe just your wallet." He turned slowly, eyes locking onto hers. Stormy gray sharp, joyless, but strangely sincere. "You look like you're trying too hard to smile," he replied, his voice low, almost a whisper. "You don't have to." Emily froze, fingers tightening around her glass. The words cut like a gentle blade, not cruel, but painfully accurate. In that moment, the mask she'd worn hiding the hurt of abandonment and the night that broke her slipped. She blinked, forcing a shaky grin. "Wow, straight for the jugular. Are you always like this with strangers?" He didn't smile, but something in his gaze softened. "Only with people who look like they're running." She took another sip of whiskey. This time it burned less. "You're not wrong," she admitted, voice lower. "But running is easier than facing it, isn't it?" She didn't know why she was talking to him, a man who radiated winter storm. Maybe it was the whiskey. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, without pity, without judgment, as if he understood. "I'm Emily," she said, holding out her hand, her smile now a little more real. "Optimist by trade, disaster by hobby." He hesitated, then took her hand. His grip was firm, warm, despite the cold air around him. "Aiden," he said. No last name, no explanation. She noticed his fingers lingered on hers just a second too long, and her heart skipped a beat. They talked, or rather, Emily talked, and Aiden listened. She spoke of her job in PR, her knack for making clients laugh, her dream of publishing children's books. She didn't mention the pain that brought her here, but each joke, each laugh was a shield. Aiden said little, but his eyes never left her, and when he did speak, every word felt carefully chosen. "You draw?" he asked, nodding at the sketchbook on the counter. She shrugged, opening it to reveal a page full of stars and quirky characters. "Helps me think, or not think, depends on the day." Her fingers brushed over a sketch of a star, her smile fading. "Tonight's masterpiece." He leaned in, studying the drawing. "It's beautiful," he said, no sarcasm, just honesty. "You're really talented." Her cheeks flushed. She covered it with another sip of whiskey. "Careful, Aiden. Compliments like that might make me believe you're human." He didn't laugh, but the corner of his mouth twitched, the closest thing to a smile she'd seen. The night passed in a blur of warmth and liquor. Emily lost count of how much she drank, but the ache in her chest had eased, replaced by a reckless heat. She leaned closer to Aiden, whispering, "Have you ever just wanted to forget everything? Just for one night?" His eyes darkened, not with anger, but with a depth that mirrored her own despair. "Every day," he said, so quietly she almost missed it. She didn't know who moved first, maybe her, maybe him, but suddenly her hand touched his. His hand was on her waist, in the space between them, vanished. "Just tonight," she whispered, lips a breath away from his. "Help me forget." He didn't answer with words. He stood, pulled her with him, and they left the bar. The rain still falling outside. His apartment was a short taxi ride away, a modern space as cold and sleek as the man himself. But in the dim light of the bedroom, with city lights leaking through the windows, nothing felt cold about the way he touched her. Fierce, yet tender, like two broken souls searching for comfort. Emily clung to him, laughter gone, replaced by a raw intensity that both scared and healed her. The next morning, she woke up to an empty bed. Sunlight streamed through the window, highlighting a business card on the table. Aidan Cross, CEO, Cross Corp. Emily stared at it, a bitter smile forming on her lips. "A CEO, huh? Well, at least I picked a quality stranger." She reached for her sketchbook and noticed a napkin beside it, the star drawing she'd left at the bar. He had kept it. She dressed quickly, fingers brushing the business card before slipping it into her pocket. Stepping outside, the city was still wet from the rain. Clutching her sketchbook, she whispered, "One night to forget. Now I have to face it." Yesterday really was the worst day of her life. The chandelier sparkled above the grand restaurant hall, where white silk-covered tables were arranged with meticulous care, and wine glasses glittered under golden lights. Laughter and conversation blended with the soft strains of a violin, setting the perfect mood for a night to remember. Emily Lang stood in the center of attention, her elegant white dress hugging her petite frame, brown hair cascading in waves. Her radiant smile, the one that made colleagues and clients adore her, lit up the room. "Thank you all for coming," she called out, lifting her glass. "Tonight is all about love, so let's drink like it." Guests laughed and applauded, no one noticing her heart racing with both nerves and joy. It was her engagement party with Mark, her boyfriend of 5 years. Mark, with his easy smile and warm eyes, had always been her rock, or so she believed. Emily glanced at him across the room as he chatted with mutual friends. She winked. He smiled back, but there was something fleeting in his eyes, a slight avoidance she couldn't quite catch. She turned back to her guests, slipping into her usual charm. "Did you know Mark chose this restaurant because he said the food's better than his love for me?" She shrugged with exaggerated drama, drawing laughs from the crowd. But deep down, a small emptiness gnawed at her. Mark had been acting strangely lately, less texting, fewer "I love yous." She told herself it was just stress, that tonight would wash away all doubts. She carried her sketchbook in her purse, a habit since childhood, when little drawings were her way of coping with abandonment. Stars, bunnies, colorful skies, her escape when the world felt too heavy. "Just get through tonight," she whispered to herself. "Everything will be fine." But everything wasn't fine. As the night wore on and the guests grew tipsy, Emily noticed Mark and Lisa, her best friend from college, had disappeared. Smiling at a guest, she excused herself and left, heart pounding. She found them in a quiet corner of the hallway near the garden. Mark leaned in, lips on Lisa's, hands around her just like he used to hold Emily. Time stopped. Emily stood frozen, wine glass trembling in her hand, the brilliant smile erased. "Mark?" Her voice cracked, barely audible. He startled, turned, panic in his eyes. Lisa looked down but didn't move from his arms. "Emily, Mark stammered, then took a deep breath as if deciding. "I'm sorry, I love Lisa. I tried, but I can't lie to myself anymore." His words hit like a blade, cold and merciless. Emily felt the world tilt, but she stayed upright, lips curling into a warped smile. "Well," she said, voice shaking, trying to stay witty, "at least the party had good food, right?" Nearby guests, beginning to sense the drama, watched her with pity. Lisa whispered something, but Emily didn't hear. She turned and walked quickly away, unwilling to let anyone see her fall apart. The rain began to fall cold and soaking through her dress. Emily walked aimlessly, clutching her sketchbook. She thought of her childhood, of the day her mother left without a word, of her father disappearing with a promise to return. "Why am I never enough?" she muttered, tears mixing with rain. She stopped in a small park, opened the sketchbook, and with shaking hands drew a picture, a girl standing in the rain, eyes sad, staring at a starless sky. Every line cut deep, but it kept her from breaking completely. She didn't know how far she walked, only that her feet led her to a small bar with warm yellow lights beckoning. She stood under the awning, drenched, looking in through the glass. Just one drink, she told herself, and I'll be fine. But deep down, she knew no drink could ever erase the feeling of being unlovable. She pushed the door open, unaware that this choice would change everything. The bar, with its soft jazz and cozy atmosphere, was where she would meet Aiden Cross, the man who would break her heart and somehow bring it back to life. You're watching Soul Stories, where every tale whispers of love, healing, and hope. This story is a work of fiction created to inspire, entertain, and share meaningful messages about the power of love and second chances. Don't forget to subscribe and be a part of our journey. For now, stay with us. The story is just beginning. The stage lights shone brilliantly on Emily Lang as she stood in the grand ballroom of the five-star hotel, her clear voice echoing through the microphone. Her emerald green dress hugged her petite frame, and her brown hair was pulled into a high ponytail, revealing a radiant smile, the same one she had practiced in front of the mirror all week to hide the cracks inside. Today, she was presenting her long-cherished children's book project to raise funds for underprivileged kids. Every illustration tells a story, she said, pointing to the screen showing a dancing bunny under a starry sky. And every story is a way to show these kids they matter. The audience applauded, but Emily's heart pounded not just from the pressure, but from the memory of a rainy night 3 weeks ago, the night she met Aiden Cross, the man with storm gray eyes. She tried to shake off his image, those piercing eyes laced with sadness, that low voice that had both scared and comforted her. Aiden Cross, CEO, Cross Corp, the business card still sat in her wallet, but she had never dared to reach out. It was just one night, she told herself every day, though her heart refused to believe it. In her sketchbook, where she captured her feelings, there was now a new drawing, a shining star next to the moon, a way to preserve that fleeting moment. The presentation ended with warm applause. Sarah, a close colleague, patted her shoulder. "You were amazing, Emily. The main sponsor wants to meet you." Emily adjusted her dress, put on a bright smile, and followed Sarah toward the reception area. But when she saw the man standing there, tailored black suit, slicked back dark hair, and those unmistakable cold eyes, she froze. Aiden Cross. Her heart skipped a beat. He saw her too, a flicker of warmth in his eyes before the ice returned. "Miss Lang," he said, his voice low and formal, as if they had never met under far more intimate circumstances. Emily forced a brilliant smile, masking her nerves. "CEO, you owe me a coffee for disappearing like that," she joked, her voice light but laced with challenge. A few people nearby chuckled, unaware of the electricity sparking between them. Aiden raised an eyebrow, the corner of his mouth twitching a rare near smile. "Coffee's easy," he said, "but I think you deserve more than that." His words made her cheeks flush, but she quickly regained her composure. "Careful, Mr. Cross. Compliments like that might make me expect more." She winked, making Sarah burst out laughing. They were invited into a small meeting room to discuss sponsorship. Aiden, as the event's main sponsor, sat across from Emily, holding a folder. She presented her project again, voice passionate, hands animated as she spoke about the children who would benefit from her books. "I want them to feel joy, to dream, the way I did when I was little," she said, eyes glowing. Aiden said nothing, but his gaze never left her, drawn not just by her smile or the way her brown hair reminded him of someone from his past, but by her energy and creativity. When she finished, he nodded. "I'll fund the entire publishing cost," he said calmly. "This project is worth it." Emily was stunned. "Really? You're not joking?" She laughed aloud, but inside she wondered, is he doing this for the project or for me? She thanked him, half joking. "Well, you're quite the knight in shining armor. Careful, I might draw you as a superhero in my book." After the meeting, Aiden unexpectedly invited her to dinner. To discuss the project further, he said, but his eyes told another story. Emily agreed, though she knew she was stepping into dangerous territory. They dined at a small restaurant, candlelight flickering on the table, the scent of Italian herbs in the air. Emily shared new ideas for her books, teasing that she'd draw a bunny in a suit just like Aiden. "It'll look cool, trust me," she said, winking. Aiden didn't laugh, but his gaze softened, and he replied, I trust you. Simple, but sincere, and it warmed her heart. After that, Aiden started seeking her out more often. One evening, he took her to a comedy movie, her pick, even though he didn't seem the type to enjoy comedy. She laughed so hard she leaned into him at times, but he just sat quietly, eyes on the screen. Another night, they grabbed a late-night bite at a street-side diner, where Emily kept cracking jokes until the staff reminded them it was closing time. They were spending time together enough for Emily to feel a connection she didn't dare name. But Aiden never held her hand in public. He never said anything close to, I love you. One afternoon, they sat on a park bench, watching people pass by. As usual, Emily teased him. You know, I bet you secretly love cheesy movies. Admit it, Mr. CEO. Aiden looked at her, something tender flickering in his eyes. You know more about me than you think, he said in a low voice. But when she asked, then what do you know about me? He just stayed silent, his gaze distant. Emily smiled weakly, hiding the sting. Right. I guess I'm just an easy-to-read picture book, huh? That night, back in her small apartment, Emily sat on her bed with her sketchbook open. She drew a glowing star beside a pale, cloud-veiled moon. Who are you? She whispered, staring at Aiden's business card on the table. And why do you keep messing with my heart? What she didn't know was that inside Aiden's wallet, the napkin sketch of the star from their first night still remained kept safe like a secret he wasn't ready to share. Their relationship, though filled with moments of closeness, still had no name. And Emily was beginning to wonder, what does he really want from me? The warm golden light of the small cafe spilled over Emily Lang's face as she sat across from Aiden Cross. The rustic wooden table between them was cluttered with empty paper coffee cups and a nearly finished plate of pastries, most of which Emily had eaten. She was in the middle of a funny story about how she once dropped her phone into a bowl of soup at a company party. So I said, well, at least now the soup has calling features? She laughed, her brown eyes sparkling, tousled hair falling over her shoulders. As usual, Aiden didn't laugh, but the corner of his mouth twitched, and his storm gray eyes softened, like he was trying to memorize every one of her smiles. It had been nearly 3 months since they reconnected at the media conference, and since then, Emily and Aiden had fallen into a strange, unnamed rhythm. They met several times a week, late-night movies in dark theaters, street food dinners at roadside stalls, or simply sitting in Aiden's sleek but cold apartment. Sometimes they spent the night together, moments filled with heat and closeness, yet void of promises. It left Emily both yearning and afraid. She liked how Aiden made her feel safe, as if she could let go of the ever-smiling mask she wore for the world. But he had never called her anything but Emily, never held her hand in public, never said anything even close to love. And that made her heart, already scarred from betrayal, feel heavier with each passing day. You know, Emily said, biting into a pastry, I'm thinking of adding a new character to my picture book, a mysterious guy who never talks, like, I'm too cool to speak vibes. She winked, mimicking Aiden's serious expression. He raised an eyebrow, voice low. He sounds boring. What would you do to make him interesting? She tilted her head, pretending to think. Maybe I'd give him a secret power, like baking really good pastries. What do you think? She laughed but stopped short when she caught the look in Aiden's eyes, not cold, but as if searching for something deep inside her. I think you'd make him special, he said, voice soft, and for a moment her heart skipped a beat. But then he looked away, took a sip of coffee, and the familiar silence settled over them again. Another evening, they went to a small indie theater and sat side by side in the dark, watching a romantic film Emily had picked, knowing full well Aiden didn't seem like the type to enjoy such movies. She laughed freely when the main character awkwardly confessed his love, occasionally bumping Aiden's shoulder. But he stayed still, eyes fixed on the screen. Have you ever done anything cheesy like that, Mr. CEO? She teased gently. Aiden looked at her, his gaze unreadable. No, he said curtly and turned back to the film. Emily forced a laugh, masking the sting in her chest. Yeah, didn't think so. The moment that truly hurt came one night at a riverside restaurant, where they sat by the window, city lights reflecting on the water. Aiden's acquaintance, a business associate named James, happened to pass by their table. "Aiden, long time no see," James grinned, then glanced at Emily. "And this is your girlfriend?" Emily opened her mouth, ready to joke to ease the tension, but Aiden spoke first, voice cold and flat. "She's a friend." The word friend hit like a blade, sharp and unexpected. Emily's heart tightened, but she laughed loudly, like nothing was wrong. "Friend, huh? Well, we're the kind of friends who do a lot of late-night eating," she said with a wink at James, though the smile never reached her eyes. After James left, an uncomfortable silence settled between them. Emily stared out the window, fingers tightening around her glass as she forced a playful tone. "Friend, huh? Guess I must be your best friend then, since I even know how you like your food ordered." Aiden looked at her like he wanted to say something, but in the end he only nodded. "You know a lot about me," he said quietly. But it wasn't enough to soothe the ache inside her. That night, back in her small apartment, Emily sat on the couch with her sketchbook open in front of her. She drew a picture for her children's book, two people standing under a starry sky, holding hands surrounded by glowing light. But when she reached the man's face, she froze. Her pencil trembled. "I wish you could see yourself," she wrote beside it, the letters shaky. Then she closed the book, and tears fell silently down her cheeks. The dazzling lights of the charity gala sparkled like stars, illuminating Emily Lang as she stood on stage, her clear voice echoing through the microphone. The fiery red dress hugged her petite figure, her brown hair flowing loose, and her radiant smile lit up the entire room. "These illustrations aren't just colors," she said, pointing to a projection of a bear hugging a shining star. "They're a way for children to know that they matter, no matter how harsh the world can be." The audience burst into applause, but Emily's heart pounded, not just from the event, but from the presence of Aiden Cross, standing at the edge of the room, his storm-gray eyes locked on her, cold, yet hauntingly intense. 3 months had passed since they reconnected, and their unnamed relationship had become an emotional maze. Dates, nights spent together, yet no promises. She felt safe with him, but his silence, his way of calling her a friend in front of others, made her already bruised heart grow heavier by the day. She clutched her small sketchbook in her purse, filled with drawings, stars, dreams as if it were a shield guarding her soul. The charity event was a success. Sponsors were enthusiastic, pledging support for her project. Emily stepped down from the stage, her smile still bright as she shook hands and thanked attendees. Aiden stood nearby, saying little, but his gaze never left her, as if she were the only thing worth seeing in the crowded room. She winked at him, teasing, "You look like you're evaluating me, CEO. What's my score?" Aiden didn't laugh, but the corner of his mouth curved slightly. "High enough that I can't look away," he replied in a deep voice, making her cheeks flush. Suddenly, a familiar voice cut through the air. "Emily!" She turned and her heart clenched. Mark, her ex-fiancé, stood there in a gray suit, his eyes filled with regret, laced with determination. The crowd around them seemed to vanish, replaced by the memory of their broken engagement the night Mark confessed he loved Lisa. "I need to talk to you," Mark said urgently, stepping closer. "I made a mistake. I want you back, Emily. I love you." His words struck like a punch, ripping open the wound she had tried to bury. Emily blinked, her dazzling smile fading, her fingers tightening around her sketchbook. She felt Aiden move closer, his breathing heavy, close enough that she could hear his heartbeat. She turned to Mark, forcing a familiar, teasing tone, but her voice shook. "Back together? Well, you sure know how to make a scene, Mark." But her smile was crooked, unable to mask the hurt. Mark didn't flinch. He stepped forward and took her hand. "I'm serious," he said, voice low, eyes locked on hers. "I realized I can't live without you. Lisa was a mistake. You're everything, Emily." The words hit like a cold wind, tearing through the fragile healing she'd fought for. Before she could reply, Aiden suddenly stepped in, his hand gripping her wrist tighter than usual, like he was pulling her away from the spiral of pain. She looked up and met his eyes, dark, possessive, like a storm about to break. Tension crackled between the three of them. Nearby guests had begun to glance over, whispering. "Who are you?" Mark asked sharply, his gaze narrowing at Aiden. Aiden didn't break eye contact with him, his grip on Emily firm, his voice ice cold. "The man who doesn't need to apologize to her." His words were sharp and unyielding warning. Emily's heart pounded. She wasn't sure if it was because of Mark's sudden reappearance or Aiden's possessive reaction. Aiden's grip tightened, his eyes still locked on Mark. Mark finally stepped back, muttering, "Think about it, Emily," before turning and walking away, leaving behind a suffocating silence. Emily pulled her wrist free from Aiden's hand and tried to lighten the mood. "Oh, are you jealous?" she teased. "You looked kind of scary back there, Mr. CEO." Aiden didn't respond. She turned away, forcing a smile. "Well, maybe it's better if you're not jealous, right?" she said, her voice trembling, then quickly walked toward the reception area, unwilling to let him see her break. But with every step, her heart ached, wondering if Aiden really cared, or if he was just protecting something that never belonged to him. After the event, Aiden quietly drove her home in his car. The silence between them was heavy, filled only by the faint patter of rain outside. Emily stared out the window, clutching her sketchbook, trying not to cry. "Thanks for the ride," she said softly. Aiden nodded but said nothing, his eyes distant as if locked in battle with himself. She wanted to scream, "What do you feel? Why won't you say something?" But she stayed silent, afraid the answer would shatter the fragile hope still flickering inside her. When she entered her apartment, Aiden remained in the car, alone. He opened his wallet and pulled out the napkin sketch of the star Emily had left that first night. He traced the lines with his finger and whispered, "Why can't I just say it?" The fear of loss, the pain of his past tightened around his chest, stealing the words his heart had been screaming. In her small apartment, Emily sat on her bed with her sketchbook open before her. She drew a new picture, a lone star in a dark sky, no moon, no other light. "What am I to him?" she whispered, voice breaking. Tears fell, blurring the lines. She closed the book and hugged it to her chest, her heart feeling like that lost star, desperate to be seen, but unsure if Aiden would ever truly see her. Still following the story? If this story found you outside of Soul Stories, we invite you home to where every touching tale begins with truth, hope, and heart. The late afternoon sun filtered through the window of Emily Lang's tiny office, casting golden light over the messy piles of paperwork and scattered sketches for her children's book project. Her small sketchbook, her lifelong companion, sat proudly on the desk, filled with sparkling stars and silly little bunnies, as if whispering, "Hey, no matter how bad life gets, there's always room for silly dreams." Though the scars left by her parents' abandonment never fully healed, Emily had kept the habit of drawing to push away sadness, or at least pretend she was okay. Today, an email from the charity fund nearly made her spill her coffee. Her entire book publishing cost had been covered by an anonymous sponsor, plus a hefty donation to expand the project to dozens more underprivileged kids. Emily clutched her pencil, heart racing like she'd just run a marathon. "Okay, who went big like this?" she muttered, eyes gleaming. She didn't need to be Sherlock to figure it out. There was only one person rich and mysterious enough to drive her absolutely nuts, Aiden Cross, the CEO with storm gray eyes that looked like they could devour the world. 3 months since they reconnected, and her relationship with Aiden remained a maze, thrilling and maddening. Ever since that dramatic night at the charity gala, when her ex, Mark, had shown up and Aiden had grabbed her hand like he was ready to rip someone's head off, Emily's emotions had been tangled beyond repair. Aiden had looked at Mark like, "One wrong move and I'll launch you into orbit," but then never said a word about how he felt. That word "friend" still clung like a thorn in her chest, making her wonder if she was just a cheap replacement for some woman from his past. Emily decided it was time to deal with Aiden. She drove straight to Cross Corp, a glass skyscraper gleaming like it belonged in a sci-fi movie. Aiden's office was on the top floor, massive as a football field, and about as warm as a freezer. He stood behind his desk in a tailored black suit, looking startled, almost guilty when she walked in. "Emily," he said, voice low, standing abruptly like he'd been caught stealing cookies. "What are you doing here?" Emily crossed her arms, flashing a triumphant grin. Secret knight in shining armor, huh, CEO? She teased. Funding my project, tossing cash into charity funds like confetti. Don't tell me a fairy godmother dropped from the sky. She pointed at him like she was hosting a comedy skit. Thanks, Aiden, seriously. But be real, why'd you go so big? Aiden fell silent, his gaze distant, like he was mentally calculating an escape route. He stepped out from behind the desk, slowly approaching her, but stopped short, as if afraid she'd hit him with another punchline. You deserve it, he said quietly, like a line from a sad movie. Your project. It reminded me there's still something good left in the world. The words were simple but sincere enough to make her heart want to dance. She tilted her head, smirking. Careful, Mr. Cross. Pulling stunts like this might make me think you've got a secret crush. For the first time, Aiden smiled, just a tiny smile, but it nearly knocked her over. You've been into me for a while, haven't you? He teased, the hint of mischief in his voice leaving her speechless. Oh my God, you can joke, she gasped, clutching her chest theatrically. Careful, I might call the press to document this rare smile. But then she grew serious, eyes searching his. Tell me the truth, Aiden. Why all the silence? I thought I was just, a friend you grab dinner with sometimes. Aiden turned away, staring out the window. His eyes darkened like a sky before a storm. After a long pause, he spoke, voice low, like telling a ghost story. There was someone. Clara. We were engaged. She left me right before the wedding. He clenched the edge of his chair. She said I was cold, that I didn't know how to love. I locked my heart after that. I'm scared. If I open it again, I'll lose everything. His confession made Emily want to hug him and maybe shake some sense into him. She stepped closer and placed a hand over his, her voice gentle, laced with her usual humor. You're not cold, Aiden. You're just stuck in your own tragic superhero movie. From her bag, she pulled out a small drawing, a sketch she'd done that morning. A bright star beside a pale moon that vaguely resembled Aiden's grumpy face. She handed it to him, grinning. You don't have to say anything. I get it. But next time, say something before I start thinking I'm in a one-sided love story. Aiden took the drawing, fingers brushing over the lines. His expression flickered pain, then something deeper. You don't understand, he said hoarsely, like he'd just run 10 blocks. You make me want to try again, but I'm a disaster at it. Emily burst out laughing, though part of her heart trembled. She wanted to believe he loved her, but the name Clara still hovered like a ghost in the room. She left his office with a bright smile, though her heart was a tangled mess. Thanks, knight in shining Armani, she called as she exited, winking over her shoulder. But next time, say something before I end up writing a whole romance novel about you. Aiden watched her go, his expression complex, tender, frustrated, and maybe just a little bit like he wanted to punch a wall. Alone in his office, Aiden stared at the star and moon drawing. He opened his wallet and carefully tucked it beside the napkin sketch of a star, the one Emily had left that very first night. Do I have the guts to keep her? He muttered. Or will she leave, just like Clara? His voice was harsh, almost angry with himself. Only fear and the tiny spark of hope Emily had slipped into his chest remained. Back in her apartment, Emily sat on the sofa, her sketchbook open in front of her. She stared at her latest drawing, a star and a moon, close but not touching. If you love me, Aiden, she murmured, half joking, half aching, then why do I still feel like the stand-in? She closed the book and hugged it to her chest, telling herself she'd wait, but not forever. The lazy afternoon sun filtered through the massive windows of Aiden Cross's mansion, casting golden light over white, ice-cold walls and furniture so luxurious, Emily Lang felt like she'd stepped into a Hollywood movie. She walked in, clutching her little sketchbook like a life raft, her bright smile plastered on like she'd just won Best Comedian of the Year. She was here for a meeting with Aiden and some partners about the children's book project, now fully funded by him, like he was casually throwing money out a helicopter. The mansion was a maze of gleaming marble floors and abstract paintings that looked like giant copies of kids' doodles. If I drop a pencil in here, Emily joked to one of the partners, we'd probably need a full Sherlock Holmes team to find it. The man chuckled and Emily winked to herself. Still the star of the show, girl. Aiden stood in the corner, storm gray eyes tracking her, the corner of his mouth twitching like he wanted to smile but was too stubborn to admit it. You'd find it, he said in that deep voice that made Emily's heart break into a little disco dance. 3.5 months since their reconnection, and their undefined relationship still felt like a jigsaw puzzle without the box cover. After the drama at the charity event, when Mark showed up and Aiden gripped her wrist like he might snap it, Emily had thought, ooh, this man might actually have real feelings. Then came the confession about Clara, the woman who left him right before the wedding, which made Emily believe he could love again. But the way he only called her Emily and stayed silent like a background character in a silent film made her fear she was just a second-hand version of Clara. The meeting went smoothly. Emily presented her new sketches with passion, as if telling fairy tales. This is our superhero bunny, she said, pointing to the screen and winking at Aiden. No suit like someone I know, but still pretty cool. Aiden didn't laugh, but his gaze never left her, as if she were the only thing in the room worth looking at. After the partners left, he asked her to stay, to review a few details. Emily raised an eyebrow, teasing. Details, or are you just trying to keep me all to yourself, CEO? He smirked and led her to his study. The study was smaller, lined with dark wooden bookshelves and a desk the size of a UN conference table. Wow, your own private library, she teased, running her fingers along the books. Let me guess, dry business manuals? Aiden raised a brow, rare amusement in his tone. You'd be surprised. She laughed, but then, while curiously poking around, she accidentally knocked over a small photo frame on his desk. She picked it up and her heart clenched. A woman with brown hair like hers, a radiant smile like hers, and eyes that glowed like her illustrations. Clara. Emily froze, hand trembling as if she'd touched a live wire. Her comedian queen smile vanished, as if someone had turned off her spotlight. She turned to Aiden, her voice soft but sharp as a blade. Who's this, mystery man? Aiden looked at the photo, his eyes darkening like a storm cloud. Clara, he said, voice rough. My ex-fiancée? Emily set the frame down, trying to keep her voice calm while her heart screamed. She looks like me, huh? Like I'm some knockoff you picked up at a flea market. She let out a hollow laugh, the kind that cracked instead of healed. Aiden didn't respond. He avoided her gaze. And that silence, it stung like a slap. Emily pulled out her phone, her fingers scrolling fast like a hacker. In minutes, she found everything. Clara had left Aiden right before their wedding, pushed by pressure from his cold, powerful family and his own emotional distance. But what made Emily want to scream wasn't the story. It was the uncanny resemblance hair, smile, even the way they tilted their heads when laughing. Oh my God, she whispered, half joking, half broken. I'm Clara 2.0, aren't I? The room spun. Not jealousy, not anger, something deeper. Pain because Aiden didn't love her. He loved Clara's shadow in her skin. I'm just her shadow, aren't I? She asked, voice shaking, eyes rimmed red. Aiden opened his mouth, but no words came, like he was truly stuck in a silent film. Emily gave a bitter laugh. Not her usual shine, but the kind people make when they've been shoved off stage. I thought you saw me, she said, her voice catching, but I guess I was just the B-list understudy. She pulled a folded paper from her bag, a new sketch she'd drawn that morning. A single star, sparkling yet alone in the sky. She placed it on Aiden's desk, scrawled with a line in messy handwriting. Thank you for making me feel safe and special once. She looked at him one last time, eyes filled with pain and resolve. I deserve to be loved for me, Aiden. Not because I remind you of someone from your photo album. Aiden stepped forward, his hand brushing hers, but she pulled away like burned. Emily, he rasped. She shook her head and cut him off. Don't say anything unless you're done starring in your solo tragedy. She turned away, hugging her sketchbook tight, and walked out. Out of the study, out of the mansion, out of his glossy luxury world that still somehow felt so cold. Each step hurt like hell, but each was also a declaration. I'm not anyone's shadow. Outside, the sunset blazed behind her like a fanfare, but Emily saw only gray. She hugged her sketchbook, whispering, I can't keep living as a side character in someone else's movie. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she smirked through them. At least, she muttered, I'm still the star of my story. Back in the study, Aiden stood frozen, holding the second star sketch. Emily's words hit like a slap, but they were also a wake-up call. He opened his wallet and placed the new drawing beside the first star she'd sketched on a napkin that very first night. She's not Clara, he whispered, voice raw with regret. But he had no idea how to prove it. Not to her, not even to himself. The soft yellow glow of the cheap desk lamp in Emily Lang's tiny apartment cast light over walls littered with sketch drafts and photos of the children she'd helped through her picture book project. The little space with its worn-out sofa and sagging bookshelf was the only place where she felt like herself. No need for the radiant stage queen smile to hide the hurt. But tonight, her heart felt heavy, like someone had strapped a weight to her chest and then asked her to breathe. She stood in front of the mirror rehearsing her goodbye to Aiden Cross, whispering, no crying, be cool, be dramatic like a full-blown K-drama finale. It had been 3 days since she found the photo of Clara in Aiden's study, the brunette with the same smile, the same soft glow in her eyes. Aiden's confession about Clara, the woman who left him before their wedding, had once made Emily believe he could love again. But that photo, his painful silence, and the way he only ever called her friend had shattered that hope like a dropped crystal vase. She texted him short and sharp like a debt collector. Come to my place, we need to talk. When the doorbell rang, she took a deep breath and pasted on a smile that screamed, I'm fine, even if her heart was bleeding. Aiden walked in, dressed in a sharp black suit, like he'd just come from the Met Gala. His storm gray eyes were filled with concern, though he tried to maintain his usual stoic calm. Emily, he said, voice low, are you okay? Emily crossed her arms, smirking, standing just far enough to avoid catching whatever disease he had called emotional repression. Okay, please, I'm a certified optimist, remember? I should get that printed on a t-shirt. She gave a short laugh, then drew in a deep breath and looked him straight in the eyes like she was stepping on stage. Aiden, you've never told me you love me. Never held my hand in public except that one time you nearly broke it in front of Mark. Never called me anything but friend. And now after seeing Clara's photo, I get it. I'm just her shadow. Some knockoff from a clearance aisle, right? Aiden opened his mouth, but Emily held up a hand like a director yelling, cut! Don't say anything. Let me finish my scene. Her voice stayed calm, but it trembled like she was singing karaoke to a breakup ballad. I've spent my whole life trying to prove I'm worthy of love. Ever since my parents left me, I've smiled and joked just to keep people from seeing I was falling apart. With you, I thought I could finally drop the mask, just be Emily Lang, star-doodling storyteller with bad puns. But I was wrong. I was just Clara's understudy. Her eyes were red, but she stood tall, refusing to be the tragic heroine. If love doesn't come with respect, what's the point, Aiden? I deserve to be loved for who I am, not because I look like your old crush. Aiden stepped forward, hand brushing her shoulder, his eyes filled with regret like she'd just thrown a dictionary at his face. Emily, you're not her, he said, voice rough. You're... But he stopped, the words stuck like rush-hour traffic in his throat. Emily gave a bitter laugh and stepped back, clutching her chest in mock pain. Oh, how romantic. You can't say it, can you? Fine. Let me end the show. We close the curtain here. She grabbed the sketchbook from the table, the one filled with illustrations of their story. The shining star from that first night, the drifting one after Mark, and the lonely star from just days ago. She shoved it into Aiden's hands, voice choked but still teasing. This is our love story, Director Cross. Consider it your parting gift collector's edition. She turned, opened the door, and finally the tears came as she whispered, I can't keep being someone's shadow, Aiden. I'm the main character, not some background extra. Aiden gripped the sketchbook like a lifeline, his eyes dazed like he'd just been kicked off his own planet. Emily, wait, he rasped, nearly breaking. But she shook her head, hand raised like a traffic cop. Stop. When you learn to love someone for who they are, call me. But I'm not waiting for Act 2. She stepped out, slamming the door behind her. Each step felt like a punch to her own chest, but also a declaration. She had to love herself before waiting on anyone else to. Outside, the night wind stung her cheeks, mixing with the tears she refused to wipe away. She wrapped her arms around herself, aching, but lighter somehow. "I guess I'm still the leading lady in my own damn life," she whispered. Her lips curled into a half-smile, and her eyes, though tired, gleamed with a spark of reclaimed pride. Inside the apartment, Aiden collapsed onto the couch, the sketchbook open in his lap. He flipped through each page like it cut him open. The first night star, 2 figures beneath the sky, the lonely star after Mark. Each stroke was a piece of Emily's heart, and that's when he realized he loved her deeply. Not because she looked like Clara, but because she was Emily, the woman whose smile made him want to laugh, whose jokes pierced through his armor, whose dreams were bright enough to light up his darkness. But he'd let her go chained by the fear Clara left behind. His fingers landed on the last page. A star and a moon, close but never touching. Beneath it, "I wish you could see yourself." His heart twisted, his storm-gray eyes filled with remorse. "I did see you," he whispered, holding the sketchbook like it might vanish. Then he stood, gaze steely with resolve. "I'm not losing her. Not again." Golden lights bathed the exhibition hall, where Emily Lang's children's illustrations hung on the walls, each one a colorful story of stars, bunnies, and dreams that never fade. Emily stood in the center of the crowd, wearing a simple blue dress, her brown hair falling loosely around her shoulders. Her radiant smile masked a quiet weariness. This exhibition was the result of months of tireless work, sponsored by Aiden Cross. It was also her first public appearance since leaving her apartment, leaving behind her sketchbook, and her goodbye. The pain from discovering Clara's photo still lingered, but Emily had learned to love herself again. Even if her heart still ached at the thought of Aiden, the hall buzzed with people admiring the artwork, listening to Emily speak. "These drawings are for the kids," she said, her voice bright but sincere, "to remind them that no matter what happens, they're still shining stars." Applause followed, but her eyes scanned the crowd, instinctively searching for a familiar face. She told herself she had let go of hope, but her heart didn't agree. In the corner of the room, Aiden Cross stood silently in a sharp black suit, his storm-gray eyes fixed on her. He had read Emily's sketchbook dozens of times since the night she walked out, each page retelling their story: the first night star, the drifting one after Mark, the lonely sketches, the aching silence. Her message, "I wish you could see yourself," had cut through him like a blade. Only then did he realize that fear of loss, of Clara, had kept him from facing the truth. He loved Emily, not because she looked like someone else, but because she was Emily Lang with her radiant smile, quick wit, and a heart that never gave up. When Emily's presentation ended, she stepped off stage to thank the sponsors. She was laughing with a group of children, one of whom asked if she could draw a superhero when the microphone crackled to life. She turned, and her heart nearly stopped. Aiden was walking onto the stage, his eyes serious, filled with purpose. The crowd hushed, curious about the cold-eyed man in the immaculate suit. "I'd like to say a few words," Aiden began, his voice deep and steady. "I'm not good at talking about emotions, but today, I have to try." He looked straight at Emily, his gaze warm, for the first time without restraint. "Emily Lang isn't just a gifted artist. She's the woman who changed my life. She's the woman I love. Not because she looks like anyone else, but because she is Emily Lang." The hall went silent, then erupted in applause. Emily stood frozen, eyes wide, her hands clutching her dress. The usual sparkle in her smile was replaced by quiet disbelief. Aiden stepped down from the stage, walking toward her, never breaking eye contact. "I was wrong," he said, voice hoarse, just loud enough for her to hear. "I saw you, Emily. I always saw you." Emily blinked, tears shimmering but not falling. Then she smiled, really smiled. "No more masks, no more pretending." "You're incredibly slow, Aiden," she said, her voice trembling, but laced with teasing warmth. "Good thing I'm patient." The crowd laughed, and for the first time Aiden smiled, truly smiled, softening his usually guarded expression. After the exhibition, they stepped outside under the starlit sky. Emily hugged a new sketchbook she'd started since leaving, but Aiden stopped her. He pulled a piece of paper from his jacket and handed it to her. It was a drawing his own. Clumsy, imperfect, but unmistakably a glowing star next to a shining moon. "Your first night star," he said, voice low. "It made me realize how special you are. I'm not good at drawing, but I needed you to know I see you, Emily." Emily ran her fingers over the shaky lines, her heart warming like a fire being lit. "You really are terrible at drawing," she joked, eyes sparkling. "But this is worth more than 1,000 perfect pictures." She looked up at him. "So what am I to you now, Aiden?" He took her hand, no hesitation this time, not caring who saw. "You're everything," he said, voice steady. Emily smiled the truest smile of her life. For the first time, she felt seen, felt loved for who she was, not a shadow, not a substitute, but Emily Lang with her stars, her dreams, her heart wide open. They stood beneath the stars, hands intertwined, the sky glittering above them as if blessing their moment of healing. Emily knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, she believed they could rebuild trust one step at a time. She tilted her head, teasing again. "You really are slow, but lucky for you, I'm patient." Aiden didn't reply. He simply squeezed her hand tighter, and the rare smile on his face was his quiet promise. He wasn't letting her go. Not this time. You're watching Soul Stories exclusive to our channel. If you're still with us, drop a comment. We read and cherish them all. Subscribe to support more heartfelt original stories. Thanks for being part of the Soul Stories family. Soft golden sunlight filtered through the trees, casting a warm glow over the garden bursting with hydrangeas and white daisies, where Emily Lang stood in a pristine white wedding dress. Her brown hair flowed freely, adorned with delicate flowers, and her radiant smile shone as brightly as the stars she used to draw. Not the kind of smile that masked pain, but one that came from a woman who knew she was loved, seen, and cherished for exactly who she was. Beside her stood Aiden Cross, dressed in a sleek black suit, his storm gray eyes no longer cold but full of warmth. He held her hand tightly, as if he never planned to let go again. 1 year had passed since the children's art exhibition, when Aiden had walked on stage and declared his love. Since then, they'd shared not only joy but challenges. They dated openly, spent countless hours talking under the stars, sharing old fears and future dreams. Aiden learned how to open up, telling her about the days he had locked himself away after Clara left. Emily spoke of a childhood marked by abandonment and how she used children's illustrations to chase the light again. From seaside drives to tiny coffee shops, they rebuilt trust brick by brick, step by step. Today, in this blooming garden surrounded by friends and loved ones, they exchanged vows. Emily looked at Aiden, her voice clear and sincere. "You really are slow, Aiden Cross, but I love the way you learned to love me." Laughter rippled through the crowd, and for the first time in public, Aiden smiled bright and unguarded. "You're my star, Emily Lang," he replied, voice deep but steady, "and I'll spend my life keeping you shining." Applause erupted, mingling with the breeze rustling through the flowers. After the ceremony, they launched a children's book together, The Star and the Moon, inspired by their own story. The cover, drawn by Emily, featured a shimmering star and a glowing moon, their lights blending under the night sky. At the launch event, Emily stood on stage beside Aiden, her tone playful. "I almost drew him as a grumpy bear, but in the end, he earned his moon status." Aiden shook his head with a soft smile, then leaned in and whispered, "You're still the star." Later, as the wedding celebration began, Emily pulled Aiden aside to a quiet corner of the garden, where strings of fairy lights hung like their own private sky. She reached into her pocket and handed him a piece of paper. It was her final drawing, 2 stars shining side by side. No moon, no distance. Beneath it, she'd scribbled, "Now we shine together, okay?" Aiden ran his fingers over the sketch, emotion glimmering in his eyes. "You always know how to make me say the things I'm afraid to," he said, voice thick with feeling. Emily tilted her head, teasing. "Well, Mr. Cross, I waited a long time for you to draw me a picture." She was referencing the clumsy but heartfelt star and moon sketch he'd given her on the night of the exhibition. Aiden took her hand and pulled her close. I may not be good at drawing, he murmured, but I'm really good at loving you. And for the first time, Emily realized those words didn't need a picture to prove them. They stood beneath the starlit sky, hand in hand, the universe watching. From that one fateful night in a bar, through heartbreaks and healing, they had arrived here, loving each other not as shadows of the past, but as whole, imperfect, luminous souls. Emily looked at him, her smile no longer a mask, but a glow from deep within. We've come a long way, haven't we? She whispered. Aiden squeezed her hand, eyes gentle but firm. And I'll walk the rest of the way with you, he replied. Emily laughed softly, leaning her head against his shoulder. Careful, Mr. CEO, that's dangerously romantic. But I like it. They stood there among the flowers and soft lights, knowing their love wasn't just passion, it was growth, trust, and the promise to keep showing up for each other. The star and the moon became a gift to children everywhere, but to Emily and Aiden, it was a testament to their journey. Emily was no longer the girl who smiled to hide her wounds, and Aiden was no longer the man who locked his heart away. They had found each other, not as shadows, but as two stars, shining side by side.